Dating can feel incredibly complicated, especially when you're young. There are so many questions that seem impossible to answer. How do you know if someone actually likes you? How do you start a conversation without making things awkward? What are you supposed to do if they leave you unread? How do you deal with rejection? How do you become more confident without pretending to be someone you're not? And maybe the biggest question of all is this: how do you actually build a healthy relationship instead of constantly worrying about whether somebody likes you? The truth is, dating isn't supposed to be some complicated game where you memorize 100 psychological tricks and suddenly everyone becomes attracted to you. Real dating is much more about learning how to communicate, understanding yourself, respecting other people, and becoming comfortable with the fact that not everyone is going to like you. That last part is especially important because one of the biggest mistakes people make is treating attraction like a test they have to pass. They meet somebody they like, that person doesn't feel the same way, and suddenly they start asking themselves, what's wrong with me? But someone not being interested in you doesn't automatically mean you're unattractive, boring, awkward, or unworthy of love. Sometimes two people simply don't click. Sometimes somebody isn't looking for a relationship. Sometimes they already like someone else. Sometimes their personality and yours just don't fit together. And sometimes there isn't even a clear reason. That's one of the hardest lessons to learn because we naturally want an explanation for everything. But dating becomes much healthier when you stop trying to force every situation to end the way you want it to. Your goal shouldn't be to make everybody like you. Your goal should be to meet people, get to know them, and figure out who genuinely enjoys being around you while you figure out who you genuinely enjoy being around. That's a completely different mindset. Instead of walking into every interaction thinking, how can I make this person like me? You start thinking, do we actually get along? That shift can completely change the way you approach dating. One of the first things you need to understand is that confidence is not the same thing as being fearless. A lot of people think confident people never get nervous, never overthink, never worry about rejection, and always know exactly what to say. That's not confidence. That's basically a fictional character. Real confidence is being nervous and still being willing to communicate. It's being uncertain and still being respectful. It's knowing that rejection might happen and understanding that you'll be okay if it does. Imagine you want to talk to someone you've been getting along with at school. You've had a few conversations, you've laughed together, and you think there might be some mutual interest. Your brain immediately starts creating 1,000 scenarios. What if I say something stupid? What if they don't like me? What if their friends find out? What if they reject me? You can spend hours thinking about those possibilities, but eventually you have to realize something. Thinking about the conversation isn't actually having the conversation. You can't think your way into certainty. At some point, you have to communicate, and that doesn't mean making some huge, dramatic confession. It can be as simple as continuing a conversation, asking about something they're interested in, or suggesting that you spend some time together in an appropriate setting. The important part is that you're giving the other person an opportunity to respond honestly. Confidence isn't controlling the outcome. Confidence is accepting that you don't control the outcome. Another huge part of dating is learning how to have an actual conversation. This sounds obvious, but many people struggle with it because they're too focused on trying to impress someone. They prepare a list of things to say, worry about whether every message sounds interesting, and completely forget that conversation is supposed to be a two-way exchange. You don't need to constantly perform. You don't need to have the funniest response every 30 seconds. You don't need to turn every conversation into some incredible story. A good conversation can start with something incredibly ordinary. Maybe you're talking about a class, a game, a movie, music, a hobby, something funny that happened during the day, or something you're both interested in. Then you listen to their response and build from it. If someone says, I've been playing this game lately, don't immediately respond with your own story and ignore what they said. Ask what they like about it. If they mention that they enjoy drawing, ask what they like to draw. If they tell you they had a terrible day, you don't need to immediately give them a 10-minute motivational speech. Sometimes simply listening matters more. People generally appreciate feeling heard, and that's something that goes far beyond dating. Being a good listener makes you a better friend, teammate, classmate, and eventually a better partner. One of the most underrated dating skills is curiosity. Not fake curiosity where you're asking questions just to keep somebody interested, but genuine curiosity where you actually want to understand who they are. At the same time, don't turn a conversation into an interrogation. There's a difference between showing interest and firing questions at someone like you're conducting an interview. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite song? Where do you want to travel? What's your favorite color? Eventually, the conversation starts feeling forced. Instead, let topics develop naturally. If someone tells you their favorite movie is a particular genre, you can talk about that genre. If they mention a hobby, explore the hobby. If something funny happens, joke about it. Conversations work best when both people contribute. You don't need to carry the entire interaction yourself. And this leads to another important lesson. Silence isn't automatically failure. Sometimes there will be pauses. Sometimes you'll run out of things to say. Sometimes a conversation will simply end. That doesn't mean you ruined everything. People aren't machines that need constant stimulation. A healthy connection can survive ordinary moments. One of the biggest mistakes people make with dating is putting someone they like on a pedestal. You see someone you're attracted to, and suddenly your brain starts treating them like they're fundamentally different from everyone else. You become overly nervous around them. You assume they're smarter, cooler, more interesting, or more valuable than you. Then you start thinking that you need to somehow prove yourself worthy of their attention. But here's the reality. They're a person. They have insecurities. They have bad days. They make mistakes. They get embarrassed. They have awkward moments. They have things they're still figuring out. You don't need to worship someone just because you find them attractive, and treating someone like a normal human being actually makes interactions healthier. You're not beneath them, and they're not beneath you. You're two people trying to figure out whether you enjoy each other's company. That mindset removes a huge amount of unnecessary pressure. Another important lesson is don't build an imaginary relationship before you've actually built a real connection. This happens more often than people realize. You meet someone, have a few good conversations, and suddenly you've imagined what your entire future together could look like. You start interpreting every little action as evidence that they're secretly interested. They smile at you, and you think about it all day. They reply quickly, and you assume it means something enormous. They don't reply for several hours, and suddenly you're convinced they've lost interest. The problem isn't having feelings. Feelings are normal. The problem is allowing your imagination to become more powerful than reality. You need to separate what you actually know from what you're assuming. If someone talks to you, you know they talk to you. If someone says they enjoy spending time with you, you know they said that. But if they liked your message, that doesn't necessarily mean they're secretly planning a relationship with you. If they looked at you across the room, you don't automatically know what they were thinking. Learning to distinguish facts from assumptions will save you an incredible amount of anxiety. This is especially important when it comes to texting. Texting has created an entire world of unnecessary overthinking. Someone doesn't respond for 2 hours, and suddenly you're staring at your phone wondering whether you did something wrong. You send a message, see that it was read, and start analyzing the exact amount of time before the reply. You notice that their response is shorter than usual and immediately assume they're angry. But here's the thing, people have lives. They have school, family, friends, responsibilities, hobbies, distractions, and sometimes they simply don't feel like being on their phone. A delayed response isn't automatically a hidden message. You shouldn't build your emotional state around notifications, and you definitely shouldn't start playing games just because you think you're supposed to. Purposely waiting 3 hours to respond because they took 3 hours isn't maturity, it's scorekeeping. If you're available and want to respond, respond. If you're busy, respond later. You don't need to manufacture distance to seem valuable. That brings us to another major dating principle: don't play manipulation games. You will hear all kinds of advice online telling you to make someone jealous, intentionally ignore them, pretend not to care, act emotionally unavailable, use calculated responses, or make them chase you. Some of those tactics might create attention in certain situations, but attention isn't the same thing as a healthy relationship. If you have to constantly manipulate someone's emotions to keep them interested, you've already created a bad foundation. You want someone to like you because they genuinely enjoy your personality, not because you successfully triggered their fear of losing you. There's a massive difference between having boundaries and playing games. A boundary sounds like, I don't want to be treated disrespectfully. A game sounds like, I'm going to ignore them for 2 days so they wonder where I am. One is self-respect, the other is manipulation. Rejection is another skill you have to learn. Nobody enjoys rejection. Even people who seem extremely confident can feel disappointed when somebody doesn't feel the same way. But rejection becomes much easier when you stop treating it as a judgment of your entire identity. Imagine you ask someone if they'd like to spend some time together and they say no. Your brain might immediately say, I'm a loser, but that's not a fact. The actual fact is simply that they said no. Everything beyond that is your interpretation. You don't know exactly what influenced their decision, and you don't need to. The mature response is to respect the answer and continue living your life. Don't repeatedly ask why. Don't try to convince them. Don't insult them because you're embarrassed. Don't tell yourself that you'll somehow make them regret rejecting you. Just accept it. Sometimes the strongest response to rejection is simply, "No problem, I understand." Then you continue forward, and here's something people don't talk about enough. You are allowed to reject someone too. Dating isn't just about trying to get somebody to choose you. You also get to decide whether somebody is right for you. Maybe someone likes you, but you don't feel the same way. That doesn't make you cruel. You shouldn't lead them on because you're afraid of hurting their feelings. You can be kind and honest. You don't need to humiliate someone or give them a long explanation. Respect works in both directions. The same way you want someone to respect your feelings when you aren't interested, you should respect theirs when they aren't interested in you. Another thing that makes dating dramatically easier is having a life outside of dating. If your entire emotional world revolves around whether somebody likes you, every interaction becomes incredibly important. A good conversation can make your entire day, while a disappointing interaction can ruin it. That's exhausting. You need other things that matter to you. Spend time with friends, work on your hobbies, learn something, exercise in a healthy way, create things, play games, study, work on your goals, make videos, develop skills. Whatever genuinely matters to you, keep doing it. A relationship should be one part of your life, not your entire identity. When you have your own interests and goals, you also become less likely to tolerate unhealthy behavior simply because you're afraid of being alone. This doesn't mean you should become obsessed with self-improvement just to become attractive. There's a trap where people start believing they need to completely reinvent themselves before they're worthy of dating. They think, once I'm more attractive, once I'm more confident, once I'm richer, once I'm more successful, then I'll finally deserve somebody. That's not how human relationships work. You should absolutely work on yourself, but do it because you want to grow, not because you're trying to earn the right to be cared about. You don't have to become perfect before you can connect with people. Everyone is a work in progress. Confidence comes partly from realizing that you can improve while still accepting yourself where you currently are. Good hygiene and basic self-care matter, but they should be approached from the perspective of taking care of yourself rather than obsessing over your appearance. Keep yourself clean, take care of your hair, wear clothes that are appropriate and comfortable, take care of your teeth, get enough rest, and generally look after yourself. You don't need some perfect appearance. You don't need to compare yourself to celebrities or influencers. You don't need to chase unrealistic standards you see online. A huge amount of what makes somebody enjoyable to be around has nothing to do with having a perfect face or body. Your attitude, kindness, humor, reliability, confidence, communication, and ability to make people feel comfortable matter tremendously. One of the most attractive qualities a person can develop is emotional stability. That doesn't mean never having emotions. It means learning how to handle them without making every emotion somebody else's responsibility. If you're disappointed, you can acknowledge that. If you're nervous, that's okay. If you're excited, enjoy it. But don't turn every emotion into an emergency. If somebody doesn't respond immediately, you don't need to send 5 messages demanding an explanation. If someone says they need some space, respect it. If you're angry, take time to calm down before saying something you'll regret. Emotional maturity is not suppressing your feelings, it's learning how to manage them. You also need to understand boundaries. Healthy dating involves respecting each other's comfort levels. Nobody owes you attention, affection, a relationship, or constant communication. You don't owe those things to someone else either. If someone says they're uncomfortable with something, stop. If you say you're uncomfortable with something, the other person should respect that. Healthy relationships don't require pressure. You shouldn't feel like you have to do something just because everyone else seems to be doing it. You should be able to say no without being punished for it, and you should be able to accept someone else's no without taking it as an insult. Respecting boundaries isn't something extra that makes a relationship good. It's one of the basic requirements for a healthy relationship. Another major lesson is don't confuse jealousy with love. Some people grow up seeing jealousy portrayed as proof that someone cares. They think, if they get jealous when I talk to someone else, that means they really love me. But jealousy is an emotion, not proof of love. A person can feel jealous and still behave badly. A healthy relationship doesn't require controlling who someone talks to, what friends they have, what they wear, where they go, or what hobbies they enjoy. You shouldn't have to constantly prove that you're loyal by giving up your independence. Trust develops through consistent behavior, honesty, and communication. And if someone is constantly trying to control you, isolate you from friends, pressure you into things you're uncomfortable with, insult you, threaten you, or make you feel afraid of their reaction, that's not something you should romanticize. A relationship should not make you feel like you're walking on eggshells. If something feels seriously wrong or unsafe, talk to a trusted adult or another person you trust. You never have to stay in a relationship just because you once cared about someone. Let's talk about first dates and spending time together, because people often make these moments far more complicated than they need to be. You don't need some extravagant experience to have a good time. Especially when you're young, simple activities can be better because they give you opportunities to actually talk and get to know each other. Something like getting food, walking around a public place, going to an activity you both enjoy, or spending time with mutual friends can be much less stressful than trying to create some perfect movie scene. The goal isn't to impress someone with money or create an unforgettable spectacle. The goal is to see how you interact in real life. Do you laugh together? Do you feel comfortable? Can you communicate? Do you respect each other? Do you enjoy being around each other when nothing extraordinary is happening? And don't forget that you should pay attention to how someone treats other people. Someone can be incredibly charming around you while treating everyone else terribly. Watch how they talk to friends, classmates, family members, teachers, workers, and people they don't need anything from. You can learn a lot from someone's behavior when they aren't trying to impress you. Kindness isn't just something someone performs for the person they're interested in. It should show up consistently. One of the most important dating lessons is don't rush the relationship just because you're excited. When you really like someone, you naturally want more conversations, more time together, more certainty, more commitment. But healthy relationships usually develop gradually. You don't need to define everything immediately. Give yourselves time to actually know each other. The person you're excited about during the first few weeks may turn out to have qualities you hadn't noticed yet. That's why time matters. Time gives you information. It allows you to see whether someone's behavior is consistent or whether they're only acting a certain way temporarily. Consistency matters more than intensity. Someone sending you a huge emotional message one night doesn't necessarily tell you everything about their character. Someone making enormous promises doesn't automatically mean they're trustworthy. Pay attention to what people repeatedly do. Do they respect your boundaries? Do they communicate honestly? Do they keep their promises? Do they treat you well even when they're frustrated? Do they apologize when they make mistakes? Do they respect your friends and interests? These everyday behaviors tell you much more than dramatic moments. You should also learn to communicate directly instead of expecting people to read your mind. If something bothers you, explain it. Don't expect someone to magically understand why you're upset. Don't test them by becoming distant and waiting to see whether they chase you. Don't create hidden rules they don't know exist. Say what you mean. A simple conversation like, "Hey, when that happened, I felt uncomfortable. Can we talk about it?" is much healthier than silently building resentment. Communication isn't always comfortable, but avoiding communication doesn't make problems disappear. Usually it just makes them grow, and when you're communicating, learn how to apologize properly. Sorry you feel that way isn't the same as taking responsibility. If you genuinely made a mistake, acknowledge what you did, recognize how it affected the other person, and try to change the behavior. But don't apologize for things that aren't actually wrong just because you're terrified of conflict. Healthy communication requires honesty from both sides. You shouldn't have to constantly accept blame for everything. Another important lesson is don't become somebody's therapist. Supporting someone you care about is a good thing. Listening, encouraging them to talk to trusted people, and being there for them can matter a lot, but you aren't responsible for fixing another person's entire life. Especially when you're young, you shouldn't feel like you have to carry another person's emotional struggles alone. If someone is dealing with something serious, encourage them to reach out to a trusted adult or qualified professional. A healthy relationship includes support, but it shouldn't turn one person into the other's only source of emotional stability. Now let's talk about friendship, because one of the best foundations for a healthy relationship is simply liking each other as people. Before asking, "Do they find me attractive?" ask, "Do I actually enjoy being around this person? Can you joke around? Can you talk about ordinary things? Can you disagree respectfully? Can you trust them? Do they make you feel comfortable being yourself?" Attraction can get your attention, but compatibility determines whether spending time together actually works. This is why you shouldn't chase someone solely because they're considered popular or attractive. Other people's opinions shouldn't decide who you're interested in. You might be attracted to someone who doesn't have the biggest social circle. You might connect with someone who has a completely different personality from the people you expected to like. You might discover that the person you initially thought was perfect isn't actually compatible with you. That's normal. Dating is partly a process of discovering what works for you. Don't let social media distort your expectations. Online, you see carefully selected moments. Couples post romantic pictures, exciting trips, gifts, anniversaries, and perfect-looking moments. You don't see every awkward conversation, disagreement, boring afternoon, misunderstanding, or ordinary day. Comparing your real life to somebody else's highlight reel will make you feel like you're behind when you aren't. Real relationships are often much more ordinary than social media makes them look, and ordinary isn't bad. In fact, being comfortable enough to simply exist around someone without constantly needing excitement can be a sign of genuine connection. You should also be careful about dating advice that reduces people to formulas. You'll see videos claiming that one gender always behaves a certain way or that there are secret rules that guarantee attraction. Be skeptical. People are individuals. Not every girl thinks the same way. Not every guy thinks the same way. Not every person wants the same kind of relationship. You can't understand an individual by memorizing stereotypes about an entire gender. The best way to understand someone is to actually listen to them. And don't let the internet convince you that dating is a competition. You don't need to have dated more people than your friends. You don't need to have a relationship just because somebody else does. You don't need to prove that you're desirable. There isn't a scoreboard. Everyone develops socially at a different pace. Some people date earlier, some later. Some people have relationships that last months. Some have relationships that last years. Some people don't date during their teenage years at all. None of those things automatically determine your value. If you're currently single, don't treat being single like a problem that needs to be urgently fixed. Being single gives you time to understand yourself. You can develop friendships without constantly worrying about romantic expectations. You can focus on school, hobbies, goals, creativity, fitness, gaming, family, and whatever else matters to you. You can learn how to communicate. You can become more comfortable socially. You can figure out what qualities you value in other people. There's nothing embarrassing about being single. And if you're interested in somebody, don't spend months building a fantasy without ever communicating. Obviously, you shouldn't rush into anything or pressure anyone, but at some point you need to let reality replace imagination. If you've built a friendship and you're wondering whether there could be something more, you can respectfully communicate your interest. You don't need a dramatic speech. You don't need to confess your deepest failings. You can simply express that you enjoy spending time with them and would like to spend more time together. Then give them room to respond. Their answer tells you what you need to know. If the answer is yes, great, keep getting to know each other. If the answer is no, accept it. And if the answer is uncertain, don't pressure them into deciding immediately. Sometimes people need time to figure out how they feel. Respecting that is far healthier than trying to force certainty. One thing you should never forget is your relationship should not determine your self-worth. If you're dating someone, you're still you. If the relationship ends, you're still you. If someone rejects you, you're still you. If someone likes you, you're still you. Your value doesn't go up because someone finds you attractive, and it doesn't disappear because someone doesn't. That's an incredibly important foundation to build before getting emotionally invested in another person. Relationships can end even when nobody did anything terrible. Sometimes people grow in different directions. Sometimes circumstances change. Sometimes two people realize they're incompatible. That can hurt, but it doesn't necessarily mean the entire relationship was a mistake. Something can be meaningful and still eventually end. Learning to let go is part of growing up. You don't have to turn every breakup into a war. You don't have to convince everyone that the other person was evil. Sometimes you can simply recognize that something didn't work anymore and move forward. Learn from every relationship without becoming cynical. If something went wrong, ask yourself what you can learn. Did you communicate enough? Did you ignore warning signs? Did you compromise too much? Did you fail to communicate your boundaries? Did you rush? Did you become overly dependent? Did you choose someone based entirely on attraction without paying attention to compatibility? Reflection helps you grow. But don't turn one bad experience into a belief that everyone is terrible. One person's behavior isn't proof that an entire gender or generation is broken. And finally, perhaps the most important dating advice is this: stop trying so hard to become someone who is impossible to reject. That person doesn't exist. You can be kind, confident, funny, interesting, respectful, successful, attractive, talented, and still have people who don't want to date you. That's not a failure. That's simply how human relationships work. You don't need universal approval. You need genuine compatibility with the people who actually fit into your life. So instead of asking, how do I make everyone want me? Start asking, how do I become someone I'm proud to be? Communicate honestly, treat people well, and recognize healthy relationships when they appear. That's a much better question, because at the end of the day, dating isn't really about learning how to make somebody obsessed with you. It's about learning how to connect with another human being while still maintaining your own identity. It's about communication instead of mind games, confidence instead of arrogance, boundaries instead of control, honesty instead of manipulation, patience instead of rushing, and compatibility instead of trying to force attraction. You don't need to become a completely different person to be worthy of a relationship. You don't need to memorize secret tricks. You don't need to chase somebody who clearly doesn't want to be chased, and you don't need to panic because you're single right now. Focus on becoming a person who can communicate, listen, respect boundaries, handle rejection, maintain friendships, pursue meaningful goals, and treat other people with dignity. When you eventually meet someone you genuinely connect with, those qualities will matter far more than any dating trick you could have learned online. So if you're watching this because you're struggling with dating right now, take a step back. Stop staring at your phone waiting for a notification to determine whether you're worthy. Stop comparing your life to couples online. Stop assuming every rejection means something is wrong with you. Stop trying to manipulate people into chasing you. Start talking to people naturally. Start listening. Start building friendships. Start taking care of yourself. Start developing your own interests. Start accepting that uncertainty is part of life. And most importantly, remember that another person's feelings are not something you can control. You can control how you communicate. You can control whether you respect their boundaries. You can control whether you treat them kindly. You can control whether you walk away from situations that aren't healthy for you. That's where your power actually is. Because the goal isn't to become someone who can get anyone they want. The goal is to become someone who doesn't have to lose themselves just because they want somebody else. The healthiest relationship you'll ever have starts with understanding that you are already a complete person before somebody enters your life. A relationship can add happiness, companionship, memories, and growth, but it shouldn't have to create your entire identity. So don't rush, don't compare, don't manipulate, don't pedestalize people. Don't ignore your boundaries, don't let rejection define you. Get to know people, let connections develop naturally. Be honest about your feelings, respect the answer you receive, and keep building a life that you're proud of whether you're dating someone or not. That's the kind of mindset that will make dating not only less stressful, but far more meaningful. There's another part of dating that almost nobody talks about enough, and that's learning how to recognize when you're genuinely interested in someone versus when you're simply attached to the idea of being wanted by them. Those two feelings can look almost identical from the outside, but they're completely different internally. Sometimes you don't actually know a person very well, but because they're attractive, popular, interesting, or simply gave you attention at the right moment, your brain fills in all the missing information. You start imagining what they're like, what it would be like to spend more time together, what your conversations could become, and what your relationship might look like. Before you know it, you're emotionally invested in someone you barely know. This can make dating incredibly confusing because you're no longer responding to the person in front of you. You're responding to the version of them you've created inside your head. The solution is to slow down and stay curious. Instead of deciding that someone is perfect because you like them, give yourself time to actually discover who they are. Pay attention to how they treat people, how they handle frustration, how they communicate when something goes wrong, whether they respect boundaries, and whether your personalities actually work together. Attraction can happen quickly, but understanding someone takes time. Don't let a few exciting conversations convince you that you know someone's entire character. Let people reveal themselves gradually. Another thing you need to understand is that attention isn't always the same thing as interest. Someone might talk to you because they enjoy your friendship. Someone might compliment you because they genuinely think you're nice. Someone might respond quickly because they're simply on their phone. Someone might joke around with you because that's their personality. None of those things automatically mean they want a romantic relationship. At the same time, you don't need to become so afraid of misreading signals that you never do anything. The healthiest approach is to stop obsessively decoding every tiny behavior and instead communicate respectfully when the time is right. Rather than spending 3 weeks analyzing whether a particular emoji meant something, focus on the actual relationship you're building. Are you consistently enjoying each other's company? Are they making an effort to talk to you? Do you both seem comfortable around each other? Is there mutual interest in spending time together? Those broader patterns tell you much more than individual moments. You don't need to become a detective. You need to become a communicator. And if you're someone who constantly worries about saying the wrong thing, here's something that might help. You don't need to be impressive all the time. Think about your closest friends. Do you carefully plan every sentence before talking to them? Probably not. You can say something stupid, laugh about it, change topics, tell a boring story, or sit quietly, and the friendship survives. Dating shouldn't require you to transform into a professional entertainer. If you feel like you have to constantly perform around someone, that's exhausting, and eventually you'll have to drop the act anyway. Instead of asking yourself, what can I say that will make them think I'm amazing? Ask, what would I naturally say if I wasn't terrified of being judged? That question can make conversations much easier. You aren't trying to convince somebody that you're perfect. You're allowing them to discover who you actually are. This is also why humor can be great, but don't make humor your entire personality. You don't need to constantly make jokes to keep someone interested. Sometimes the funniest people aren't even trying to be funny. They're simply comfortable enough to react naturally to what's happening. And if a joke doesn't land, don't panic. Everybody says something that gets absolutely no reaction sometimes. You make the awkward joke, the other person stares at you for half a second, and suddenly your brain tells you that you've permanently destroyed the relationship. You haven't, just move on. Laugh at yourself if it's appropriate, change the topic, and keep talking. Being able to survive a mildly awkward moment without falling apart is actually a form of confidence. You should also understand the difference between being interested and becoming dependent. It's completely normal to get excited when someone you like messages you. It's normal to think about them. It's normal to look forward to seeing them. But when their attention becomes the main source of your happiness, things become unhealthy. Suddenly, every interaction determines your mood. If they respond, you're happy. If they don't, you're miserable. If they compliment you, you feel valuable. If they seem distant, you feel worthless. That's an enormous amount of emotional power to give another person. A healthy relationship should add to your life, not become the thing holding your entire emotional state together. Keep your friendships, keep your hobbies, keep working toward your goals, keep having experiences that don't involve the person you're dating. You should be able to miss someone without feeling like your life stops when they're not around. Another mistake people make is assuming that being constantly available will make someone like them more. You don't need to drop everything every time somebody messages you. But you also don't need to intentionally disappear to seem mysterious. The healthy middle ground is simply having your own life. If you're busy, you're busy. If you're free, you're free. If you want to talk, talk. There doesn't need to be a strategy behind every response. People sometimes spend so much energy trying to appear valuable that they forget to actually build a valuable life. The strongest way to become less dependent on someone's attention isn't pretending you don't care. It's genuinely having things you care about besides them. Let's talk about jealousy from your own side, because this can become a serious problem if you don't understand it. Maybe the person you like has other friends. Maybe they talk to someone else. Maybe they're laughing with somebody at school. Your brain might immediately start creating stories. They like that person more than me. I'm going to lose them. Maybe I'm not good enough. But remember, having other relationships doesn't automatically threaten yours. People are allowed to have friends. They are allowed to interact with classmates. They are allowed to have interests and connections outside of you. If you want a healthy relationship, you need to learn how to tolerate the fact that you cannot monitor another person's every interaction. Trust means allowing someone to have freedom while still believing in the relationship you've built. And if you do feel jealous, don't turn the feeling into an accusation. You can acknowledge it privately and figure out why you're feeling that way. Maybe you're afraid of being replaced. Maybe you've been rejected before. Maybe you're comparing yourself to someone else. Understanding the source of the emotion can help you handle it better, but don't make another person responsible for constantly reassuring you that you're better than everyone else. Reassurance can be healthy in moderation, but if you need constant proof that someone likes you, eventually neither person will feel comfortable. Another important lesson is don't compare yourself to whoever your crush has liked before. This is a trap that can consume your confidence. You might see an old picture or hear about someone they used to like and immediately start asking yourself whether you're more attractive, funnier, smarter, or more interesting. But relationships aren't competitions where one person wins and another person loses. People can be attracted to different personalities at different times in their lives. Someone liking a different person doesn't automatically mean that person is better than you. Compatibility isn't a ranking system. And while we're talking about comparison, stop comparing your dating life to your friends' dating lives. One friend might have a relationship at 14 or 15. Another might not date until much later. Someone might have several relationships while another person has none. None of these timelines determine whether you're doing something wrong. People mature socially at different speeds. Your circumstances are different. Your personality is different. Your opportunities are different. There is no universal deadline where you're supposed to suddenly become experienced at dating. If you're currently single, you haven't failed a test. You're simply single. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is being comfortable approaching people without immediately making the interaction romantic. If every interaction with someone you're attracted to becomes a high-stakes event, you're going to feel nervous constantly. Instead, practice simply being social. Talk to classmates. Talk to people in your hobbies, participate in group activities, make friends, ask people questions, learn how to have ordinary conversations. Social confidence develops through repetition. You don't need to turn every interaction into a romantic opportunity. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply become more comfortable talking to people. And when you do like someone, remember that you don't have to confess every feeling immediately. Sometimes people think honesty means telling someone everything you felt after knowing them for a few days. That's not necessarily healthy. Emotional honesty also includes having appropriate timing. You can be honest about being interested without overwhelming someone. You can say that you enjoy talking to them. You can ask if they'd like to hang out. You can gradually communicate more as the relationship develops. Honesty doesn't require intensity. In fact, calm honesty is often much easier for both people. Another thing to avoid is making promises about a future you haven't built yet. When people become excited about each other, they can start making enormous statements about how they'll always be together, how nobody else could ever compare, or how they know this is going to last forever. It might feel romantic in the moment, but relationships change. You're still learning about each other. It's okay to enjoy the present without trying to guarantee the future. You don't need to know whether something will last forever to appreciate what it means right now. You should also learn how to recognize healthy disagreement. Two people who care about each other will not agree on everything. You might have different opinions, different preferences, different communication styles, or different priorities. The goal isn't to eliminate disagreement. The goal is to learn how to disagree without attacking each other. You can say, "I see it differently," without saying, "You're stupid." You can be frustrated without insulting someone. You can take a break from a conversation if you're too angry to communicate respectfully, and if you make a mistake, you should be able to admit it. A relationship where nobody is ever allowed to be wrong isn't healthy. There's also something powerful about learning when to walk away. Sometimes people become so focused on keeping a relationship that they ignore how unhappy they are inside it. They think, "I've already invested so much time." But time invested doesn't mean you have to keep investing forever. If someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries, constantly puts you down, manipulates you, or makes you feel unsafe, you don't need to stay simply because you once cared about them. Leaving an unhealthy situation isn't always easy, but protecting yourself matters. At the same time, don't confuse ordinary relationship problems with toxic behavior. Every relationship will have misunderstandings. People will occasionally say something insensitive. Someone might forget something. You might have a disagreement. One mistake doesn't automatically mean the relationship is toxic. Look at patterns. Does the person recognize mistakes and try to improve? Can you talk about problems? Do they respect you? Or do the same harmful behaviors happen repeatedly with no accountability? Patterns matter more than isolated moments. Another huge piece of dating advice is learn to maintain your friendships while dating. When people enter a new relationship, they sometimes disappear from their friends completely. They stop hanging out with everyone else. They stop participating in activities. Their entire social world becomes one person. Then if the relationship ends, they suddenly realize they've isolated themselves from everyone. Don't do that. Your friends matter. Your family matters. Your hobbies matter. A relationship should fit into your life rather than replacing your entire life. You also don't need to announce every detail of your relationship to everyone online. Privacy can be healthy. Not everything needs to become a post, story, screenshot, or group chat discussion. The more people involved in your relationship, the more opinions you're going to receive. Suddenly, you're not just trying to solve a disagreement with another person. You're trying to satisfy 10 friends who each have their own interpretation. Obviously, if something serious or unsafe is happening, you should tell a trusted adult or someone who can help. But ordinary relationship moments don't necessarily need an audience. And if you're nervous about what your friends will think about someone you're interested in, remember that they don't have to date that person, you do. Your friends can offer useful perspectives, but you still need to make your own decisions. Sometimes friends notice warning signs you missed, so don't automatically dismiss them. But don't let friends pressure you into dating someone you don't like either. The relationship is yours to navigate. One final mindset shift can change everything. Stop asking, "How do I get someone?" and start asking, "How do I build a connection?" Getting someone sounds like they're an objective you're trying to acquire. Building a connection recognizes that there's another human being involved. You can't force genuine connection. You can create opportunities for it. You can communicate. You can be kind. You can be interesting. You can listen. You can show interest. You can spend time together. But ultimately, both people have to choose it. And that brings us back to the central lesson of dating. You cannot control another person's feelings, but you can control the kind of person you are in the relationship. You can be honest, you can be respectful, you can communicate, you can take responsibility, you can respect boundaries. You can walk away when something is unhealthy, you can accept rejection without bitterness, you can appreciate someone without putting them on a pedestal, you can care about someone without abandoning yourself. Those are the skills that actually matter. So if you're watching this and you're currently struggling because you don't feel like you're good enough, take a breath and zoom out. Your entire future isn't determined by whether one person likes you right now. Your social life isn't finished because you've been rejected. You haven't missed your chance because you haven't dated yet. You don't need to become somebody else. Keep growing, keep meeting people, keep learning how to communicate, keep building friendships, keep taking care of yourself, and let relationships develop naturally rather than desperately trying to force them. The best dating advice isn't a secret phrase, a psychological trick, or a strategy for making someone chase you. It's learning how to be secure enough in yourself that you can genuinely connect with another person without needing to control them. It's understanding that attraction is mutual or it isn't. It's realizing that rejection hurts but doesn't destroy you. It's knowing that being single isn't a personal failure. And it's recognizing that the right relationship isn't one where you constantly have to prove your worth. It's one where two people can be themselves, communicate honestly, respect each other's boundaries, and genuinely enjoy being part of each other's lives. So don't rush the process. You have time to learn. You're going to have awkward conversations. You're going to misunderstand people sometimes. You might get rejected. You might develop feelings for someone who doesn't feel the same way. You might eventually date someone and realize you're not compatible. You might make mistakes. That's all part of learning how relationships work. The goal isn't to become someone who never experiences those things. The goal is to become someone who can experience them without losing themselves. And when you finally understand that, dating becomes a lot less frightening. You stop treating every interaction like a test. You stop believing that one person's opinion determines your value. You stop obsessing over every text message. You stop chasing people who don't want to be chased. You stop pretending to be someone you're not. Instead, you start talking to people because you're genuinely interested in knowing them. You start building connections instead of collecting attention. You start looking for compatibility instead of validation. And that's when dating starts becoming something meaningful, rather than something you constantly feel like you have to win. Dating is one of those things that sounds incredibly simple until you actually start experiencing it yourself. On paper, it seems like all you have to do is meet someone, talk to them, get along, and eventually become a couple. But in reality, there are so many emotions involved that even the smallest interaction can suddenly feel like the biggest thing in the world. You can spend an entire day wondering why someone took so long to respond to your message, replaying a conversation in your head, because you think you said something awkward, wondering whether someone actually likes you or was simply being friendly. Or comparing yourself to somebody else because you think they're more attractive, more confident, or more interesting than you are. And the crazy part is that sometimes none of those thoughts are even based on reality. They're based on assumptions. They're based on fear. They're based on the stories your brain creates when it doesn't have enough information. That's why one of the first things you need to understand about dating is that you cannot build a healthy relationship entirely inside your own head. At some point, you have to interact with the actual person instead of the imaginary version of them you've created. You have to talk to them, listen to them, spend time around them, and allow them to show you who they really are. You can't know exactly what somebody is thinking just because they looked at you a certain way. You can't know that they secretly hate you because they didn't respond immediately. You can't know that they're completely in love with you because they laughed at your joke. Human beings are complicated, and the only way to actually understand somebody is through time and communication. So if you're someone who constantly overthinks every little sign, Start learning how to separate what you know from what you assume. What you know is that they talked to you. What you know is that they agreed to hang out. What you know is that they told you they enjoy your company. What you assume is everything happening inside their head that they haven't actually communicated. That distinction alone can save you from an enormous amount of unnecessary stress. Another thing you need to understand is that you don't need to become a completely different person to be attractive. A lot of dating advice online makes people believe that there is some perfect version of themselves hiding somewhere in the future. They think that if they become more confident, get better clothes, become more successful, become funnier, change their personality, or somehow become more impressive, then suddenly everyone will want them. But that's not how attraction works. There isn't one universal personality that everyone is attracted to. Some people love quiet personalities, some people love energetic personalities, some people love people who are extremely talkative, some people prefer people who are more reserved, some people love humor. Some people care deeply about shared interests. Some people are attracted to confidence, while others appreciate kindness and thoughtfulness more. People are different, so instead of spending your entire life trying to become universally appealing, focus on becoming a version of yourself that you're actually proud of. Improve yourself because you want to grow, not because you believe you're currently unworthy of being liked. There's a massive difference between those two mindsets. One says, I'm terrible and I need to become someone else before anyone can love me. The other says, I'm already a person with value and I want to continue growing. The second mindset is much healthier because you aren't making another person's attention the reward for your self-improvement. And here's something that might surprise you. Confidence often comes after action, not before it. People wait to feel confident before they talk to someone, but confidence doesn't usually work that way. Imagine you're nervous about starting a conversation with someone you don't know very well. You keep thinking, once I feel confident, I'll do it. Then 10 minutes pass and you're still waiting. Another 10 minutes pass and you're still waiting. Eventually you realize that confidence isn't magically arriving. The only way to teach your brain that you can handle the situation is to actually experience it. You say hello, you ask a question, you have a conversation, maybe it's amazing. Maybe it's awkward, maybe you run out of things to say, maybe you realize you don't have much in common. Whatever happens, you survive the interaction, and the next time it becomes slightly less intimidating. That's how confidence develops. It isn't about convincing yourself that nothing can go wrong. It's realizing that even if something goes wrong, you can handle it. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're interested in someone is trying too hard to impress them. They suddenly start changing the way they talk. They pretend to be interested in things they don't care about. They exaggerate their accomplishments. They act like they're constantly busy. They pretend they don't care. They try to seem mysterious. They start analyzing every sentence before sending it, and the entire interaction becomes exhausting because they're essentially performing a character. But here's the problem with that. Even if the person likes the character, eventually they're going to meet the real you. You don't want someone to become interested in a fake version of you that you can't maintain. You want someone who actually enjoys your real personality. That doesn't mean you should have zero self-awareness. Of course, you should be respectful and considerate, but you don't need to constantly calculate how you're being perceived. If you're naturally funny, be funny. If you're naturally quiet, that's okay. If you're passionate about a hobby, talk about it. If you're nervous, you don't have to hide every trace of nervousness. Sometimes simply being genuine makes conversations much easier because you aren't spending half your mental energy trying to control the other person's opinion of you. This leads into one of the most important lessons about dating. Stop trying to control the outcome. You can do everything right and someone still might not like you romantically. You can be kind, funny, confident, respectful, interesting, and attractive, and another person can still say no. That's not a flaw in the system. That's literally how personal preference works. Imagine you walk into a restaurant and your friend orders a food you don't like. You wouldn't look at them and say, "Why didn't you choose the food I wanted?" You understand that people have different preferences. Attraction is similar. You can't force yourself into someone's preferences. You can only present who you are and allow them to decide whether they connect with you, and they get to make that decision just as much as you do. This is why rejection isn't proof that you're inferior. It's information. It tells you that the connection you wanted isn't mutual. That's disappointing, but it's also useful because now you know where you stand instead of spending months wondering. Rejection is one of the most important experiences you can learn to handle. It can feel embarrassing, especially when you're young, because you might worry that everyone is going to know. But in reality, people usually care much less than you think. You might spend 3 days thinking about a rejection that the other person barely remembers a week later. That's because we're all living inside our own heads. Your embarrassing moments feel enormous to you because you're experiencing them from the inside. Other people are experiencing their own lives. So if somebody doesn't feel the same way, don't turn that moment into a permanent statement about yourself. Don't say, nobody will ever like me. Don't say, I'm not attractive enough. Don't say, I'm a failure. The correct conclusion is much simpler. That person wasn't interested. That's it. Don't add 10 negative assumptions to a simple fact. Another major piece of dating advice is don't chase someone who consistently shows you that they don't want to participate. There's a difference between someone being busy occasionally and someone repeatedly giving you no effort. If you're always starting the conversations, always making plans, always asking questions, always trying to keep things alive, and they consistently give you minimal effort, pay attention to that pattern. You don't need to become angry. You don't need to insult them. You don't need to make some dramatic exit announcement. You can simply step back. Mutual interest should eventually involve mutual effort. You shouldn't have to beg someone to talk to you. You shouldn't have to convince someone that you're worth their time. And this applies to friendships too. Healthy relationships aren't built by one person doing everything while the other person simply receives. At the same time, don't expect someone to match your communication style perfectly. People have different personalities. One person might text constantly while another person barely uses their phone. One person might express affection through words while another expresses it through spending time together or helping out. This is why communication matters. Don't immediately assume that somebody doesn't care because they don't communicate exactly the way you do. But if a difference is causing problems, talk about it. You can say, I feel more connected when we talk regularly, rather than silently expecting them to figure that out. People aren't mind readers. You also need to understand that being interested in someone doesn't mean you have to abandon your own life. This is one of the easiest traps to fall into when you're excited about somebody. Suddenly you want to spend every possible minute talking to them. You stop doing other things. You ignore your friends. You spend hours checking your phone. Your hobbies start disappearing. And eventually the relationship becomes your entire world. That's dangerous because if something changes, you have nothing else holding you up. A healthy relationship should exist alongside the rest of your life. Keep your friends, keep your hobbies, keep working toward your goals. Keep doing the things that make you who you are. You should be able to love spending time with someone without becoming completely dependent on their presence. Don't confuse missing someone with needing them. Missing someone simply means you enjoy their presence and notice when they're gone. Needing someone for your entire sense of happiness is different. It's okay to want companionship. It's okay to want affection. It's okay to want a relationship, but you should still be capable of enjoying your own life when you're alone. That independence actually makes relationships healthier because you're choosing to be with someone rather than feeling like you cannot function without them. Another important lesson is don't make your crush the center of your identity before you even know them. You might start telling your friends about them constantly. You might change your plans because you think they'll be somewhere. You might spend hours looking at their social media. You might know every detail about their life while they barely know yours. At that point, you're not building a relationship. You're building an obsession around an idea. Instead, focus on actual interaction. Talk to them. Get to know them naturally. Let your feelings develop based on reality instead of imagination. And when you're talking to someone, learn to listen instead of waiting for your turn to speak. This is one of the most valuable social skills you'll ever develop. If someone tells you something about themselves, don't immediately turn the conversation back to yourself. Ask follow-up questions. Remember small details. If they mention they had an important test coming up, ask them later how it went. If they told you about a hobby they enjoy, remember it. This doesn't mean you need to memorize everything about them. It simply means you're paying attention. People can usually tell when someone is genuinely interested versus when they're just waiting for an opportunity to talk about themselves. But don't turn listening into trying to become their perfect match. You don't need to agree with everything someone says. In fact, healthy relationships require individuality. If someone says their favorite movie is one you don't like, you can say, I actually didn't like that one, and explain why. You don't have to pretend to enjoy everything just because you want them to like you. Authenticity matters. You want somebody to know who you actually are, including your opinions, interests, and personality. Another thing that matters enormously is how you handle boundaries. If someone says they're uncomfortable, respect it. If they don't want to talk about something, don't pressure them. If they don't want to spend time together, accept it. And your boundaries matter too. You shouldn't feel pressured to do things simply because you think it will make someone like you. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to constantly prove yourself by ignoring your own comfort. If something feels wrong, you're allowed to say no. If you're unsure about something, you can take your time. You never owe someone an interaction simply because they like you. This is also why pressure should never be mistaken for confidence. Some people online teach that you need to be extremely aggressive or persistent when asking someone out, but confidence isn't refusing to accept no. Confidence is being able to express your interest clearly and then respecting the other person's answer. If someone says no, you don't need to keep asking in different ways. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to make them feel guilty. You simply accept their answer and move forward. That's confidence because you're comfortable enough with yourself to respect another person's choice. And if somebody rejects you, don't retaliate, don't insult them, don't spread rumors, don't tell everyone they're a terrible person simply because they didn't like you back. You might feel embarrassed or hurt, but you still have control over how you behave. You can be disappointed without becoming cruel. In fact, the way you respond to rejection says a lot about your character. Anyone can be kind when they're getting exactly what they want. The real test is how you behave when you don't get what you want. Another thing you should learn is not to interpret every relationship problem as a sign that the relationship is doomed. People have bad days, people misunderstand each other, sometimes somebody says something poorly. Sometimes someone needs space. The important thing is whether you can communicate afterward. Relationships aren't perfect conversations where everyone always says the right thing. They're two imperfect people learning how to understand each other. If both people can apologize, listen, and improve, small problems don't have to become huge ones. However, don't use relationships take work as an excuse to tolerate constant disrespect. There's a difference between normal disagreement and repeated harmful behavior. If someone repeatedly insults you, manipulates you, isolates you from friends, pressures you, threatens you, or makes you feel unsafe, that's not simply a relationship needing more effort. That's a situation where you need support and distance. Talk to someone you trust rather than trying to handle serious situations completely by yourself. Another underrated dating skill is knowing when to slow down. Sometimes everything feels exciting at first. You're talking constantly. You're learning about each other. Everything seems perfect, but excitement can make you ignore important information. Give yourself time to see whether the connection is actually stable. Don't let one amazing conversation convince you that you know someone completely. Don't make enormous promises based on a few good weeks. Let time reveal whether someone's behavior is consistent. Anyone can be charming temporarily. Character shows itself over time. This is why actions matter more than words. Someone can tell you that they care about you, but how do they treat you? Do they respect your boundaries? Do they listen when you talk? Do they apologize when they're wrong? Do they keep their promises? Do they treat you with kindness when they're frustrated? Do they respect the other people in their life? Pay attention to patterns rather than dramatic declarations. A person doesn't prove their character through one beautiful speech. They prove it through repeated behavior. You should also pay attention to how you feel around someone, not just whether you're excited, but whether you generally feel comfortable being yourself. Do you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells? Are you terrified of saying the wrong thing? Are you always worried they'll leave if you disagree? Are you constantly trying to earn their approval? Those feelings are worth paying attention to. A healthy relationship shouldn't require you to constantly perform for someone's acceptance. And remember, you don't need to be perfect for someone to like you. You're going to have awkward moments. You're going to say something weird, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have days where you're not particularly confident. That's normal. If someone only likes you when you're performing perfectly, that's not a very stable foundation. Real connection requires room for people to be human. One of the best things you can do before dating seriously is build strong friendships. Friendships teach you how to communicate, compromise, listen, handle disagreements, and respect other people's boundaries. They also help you understand what kinds of personalities you naturally connect with. And having friends prevents you from putting all of your social needs onto one romantic relationship. A strong social life makes dating healthier because you have people to talk to and experiences that exist outside of romance. You should also remember that your friends aren't automatically experts on your relationship. They can give advice and sometimes they can notice things you don't, but ultimately they're seeing only part of the situation. Don't let a group chat decide every move you make. If you have a disagreement with someone you're dating, talk to that person rather than immediately sending screenshots to 10 people asking what every sentence means. Sometimes outside advice is helpful, but constantly outsourcing your decisions can prevent you from learning how to communicate for yourself. Another important lesson is don't use dating to prove something to other people. Don't get into a relationship just so you can tell your friends you have one. Don't date somebody because everyone else thinks they're attractive. Don't stay with someone because you're afraid people will think you're lonely if you're single. Your relationship isn't a status symbol. It's part of your personal life. The only people who need to genuinely enjoy the relationship are the people actually in it. And if you're single right now, don't let that make you desperate. Desperation can cause people to ignore obvious incompatibilities because they're so focused on having a relationship. They see somebody attractive and immediately think, I need this person. But you don't know whether you actually want them in your life until you know them. Slow down. Ask yourself whether you like their personality, values, humor, communication style, and character. Attraction is only one piece of the puzzle. Sometimes the best dating decision you can make is walking away from someone you really like because you realize they aren't good for you. That's difficult because feelings don't automatically disappear just because your brain recognizes a problem. You can care about someone and still realize that being around them isn't healthy for you. You can miss somebody and still know you shouldn't go back. Emotional maturity is understanding that feelings are information, but they aren't always instructions. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. And if a relationship ends, don't immediately assume you need another person to replace it. Give yourself time. Let yourself process what happened. Spend time with friends. Return to your hobbies. Think about what you learned. You don't need to immediately prove that you're desirable by finding somebody else. Sometimes being alone for a while teaches you more than immediately entering another relationship. The biggest lesson I want you to take away from all of this is that dating isn't about winning. There is no prize for getting the most attention. There is no scoreboard that determines who is attractive enough. There isn't some magical age where you suddenly become successful at relationships. And there isn't one secret technique that makes everyone fall for you. Dating is simply two people figuring out whether they enjoy each other enough to build something together. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. Sometimes you become friends, sometimes you date for a while and realize you're incompatible. Sometimes something works beautifully. Life is unpredictable. So instead of obsessing over whether somebody likes you, focus on becoming someone who knows how to build healthy connections. Learn to communicate, learn to listen, learn to handle rejection, learn to respect boundaries, learn to maintain your own life, learn to recognize when someone treats you well. Learn to recognize when someone doesn't. Learn to be honest about your feelings without trying to control another person's response. And most importantly, learn that your worth doesn't depend on romantic attention. Because once you stop believing that you need somebody else to validate you, dating becomes much easier. You can approach people without feeling like your entire identity is on the line. You can accept rejection without collapsing. You can appreciate somebody without putting them above yourself. You can walk away when something isn't healthy. You can say no when you're uncomfortable. You can enjoy being single without feeling like something is missing. And when you eventually find someone you genuinely connect with, you'll be entering that relationship because you want to share your life with them, not because you're desperately trying to fill a hole in yourself. So if you're struggling with dating right now, don't panic. You aren't behind, you aren't broken. You don't need to become somebody completely different. Start small, talk to people, make friends, get comfortable being yourself, take care of your life outside of relationships. Stop obsessing over every text message. Stop trying to decode every look. Stop comparing yourself to people online. Stop treating rejection like a verdict. Let people show you who they are, and let yourself be seen for who you actually are. The right connections won't require you to become a character. They won't require endless manipulation or mind games. They'll grow through mutual interest, respect, communication, and time. At the end of the day, the best dating advice is surprisingly simple. Be someone you respect, treat other people with respect, communicate honestly, and don't try to force what isn't mutual. You don't have control over whether someone chooses you, but you do have control over whether you choose yourself. And that means protecting your boundaries, continuing to grow, maintaining your friendships, pursuing your goals, and refusing to let one person's opinion determine how you see yourself. Dating can be exciting, confusing, awkward, emotional, and sometimes painful, but it's also an opportunity to learn about yourself and other people. You don't need to have everything figured out right now. You just need to keep learning, keep growing, and remember that a relationship is supposed to be something two people willingly build together, not something one person has to chase, force, or earn.